The moment you need someone to approve of you, you give them power over you. And most people don't even realize when it happens. You think you're being respectful when you ask for everyone's opinion before making a decision. You think you're being kind when you change your behavior because someone seems disappointed. You think you're being humble when you constantly explain yourself, defend your choices, and try to prove that you're a good person. But underneath all of it, there may be something much more dangerous happening. You're teaching people that their approval can control your behavior. And once someone discovers that you need them to like you, they don't have to threaten you, manipulate you, or dominate you. They simply have to withdraw their approval. Suddenly, you become uncomfortable. You start explaining. You start chasing. You start compromising. You start asking yourself what you did wrong. And without realizing it, the other person's reaction becomes the steering wheel of your life. That's why some people can say almost nothing and still control the entire room, while others can talk for 20 minutes and somehow lose respect with every sentence. The difference isn't confidence. It's dependence. A man who needs to be approved of cannot truly be free, because every decision carries the question, what will they think of me? And once that question becomes more important than what do I believe is right, you've already surrendered something. So here's the uncomfortable truth. The harder you try to make people approve of you, the less they have to respect you. Because respect begins where the need for approval ends. And in this video, you're going to understand exactly why that happens, how people unconsciously detect your need for validation, and how to remove that weakness without becoming cold, arrogant, or emotionally detached from everyone around you. Because the goal isn't to make people dislike you. The goal is to reach a point where their approval feels good, but their disapproval no longer controls you. Think about the last time you made a decision and immediately wondered what someone else would think. Maybe you wanted to change your career, start a business, in a relationship, move somewhere new, change your appearance, spend less time with certain people, or simply say no to something you didn't want to do. Before you even considered whether the decision was right for you, you imagined the reactions. Your parents might disagree. Your friends might think you've changed. Your partner might become upset. Your coworkers might judge you. Someone might call you selfish. Someone might say you're making a mistake. And suddenly your decision is no longer just a decision. It becomes a negotiation with an invisible audience. You start editing your life before anyone has even criticized it. This is where approval becomes dangerous. Because when you constantly predict other people's reactions, you begin making choices based on avoiding discomfort rather than pursuing what you actually value. You don't necessarily choose the life you want. You choose the version of your life that produces the least disapproval. And that can look perfectly normal from the outside. You have a job. You have friends. You have relationships. You appear responsible. You don't cause problems. You don't make people uncomfortable. Everyone likes you. But privately, something feels wrong. Because somewhere along the way, you became very good at being acceptable and very bad at being honest with yourself. You became the person who says, it's fine when it isn't. You say yes when you want to say no. You laugh when something bothers you. You stay quiet when you disagree. You keep relationships alive because you're afraid of what ending them will say about you. You tolerate behavior because confronting it might make someone angry. And every time you choose approval over authenticity, you reinforce the same internal message. Their reaction matters more than my truth. That message is extremely expensive because the more you depend on approval, the more sensitive you become to disapproval. A person who doesn't need validation can hear criticism and evaluate it. A person who desperately needs validation hears criticism and experiences it as a threat to their identity. Someone says, I don't like your decision, and you don't simply hear an opinion. You hear, you are wrong. Someone says, I disagree with you, and you don't simply hear disagreement. You hear, you are not good enough. Someone becomes distant, and you don't simply observe distance. You immediately wonder, what did I do? This is how external approval becomes internal control. And people don't even have to consciously manipulate you for it to happen. They simply learn what reactions you cannot tolerate. If disappointment makes you panic, disappointment becomes powerful. If silence makes you anxious, silence becomes powerful. If criticism makes you defensive, criticism becomes powerful. If rejection makes you chase, rejection becomes powerful. And eventually, people can influence your behavior without ever asking you directly. They know what happens when they become cold. They know what happens when they stop responding. They know what happens when they disagree. They know that you'll probably try to repair the situation because you can't tolerate the possibility that they might not approve of you. That's why emotional independence is so important. It doesn't mean becoming indifferent. It means allowing people to have reactions without automatically changing yourself to control those reactions. Imagine someone tells you, "I'm disappointed in you." The approval-dependent person immediately starts explaining. "I didn't mean it that way. I was trying to help. I thought you understood. I didn't want to upset you." They aren't even thinking about whether their decision was right anymore. They're trying to restore approval. But the emotionally independent person can pause and say, "I understand that you're disappointed." That's it. They don't necessarily apologize because someone is disappointed. They don't automatically reverse the decision. They allow the other person to feel what they feel. This is incredibly difficult because most people have been trained to treat emotional discomfort as something they must immediately eliminate. If someone is upset, fix it. If someone is disappointed, explain. If someone is angry, apologize. If someone disagrees, defend yourself. But what if you don't? What if you allow the discomfort to exist for a moment? What if you accept that someone can be upset with you and you can still be okay? That is where your independence begins. Because you cannot control how everyone feels about you. No matter how kind you are, someone will misunderstand you. No matter how honest you are, someone will accuse you of being selfish. No matter how generous you are, someone will eventually want more. No matter how successful you become, someone will criticize you. No matter how carefully you communicate, someone will interpret your words differently than you intended. If your peace depends on universal approval, you're asking for something nobody can give you. You're making yourself responsible for an impossible job. And the worst part is that you'll slowly begin sacrificing your identity in pursuit of something that can never be secured. There will always be another person to impress, another opinion to satisfy, another criticism to answer, another person who thinks you're doing it wrong, another person who thinks you should be different, another person whose approval you could chase. So eventually, you have to make a decision. Either you build your life around your own values, or you build it around managing everyone else's reactions. You cannot fully do both. And this doesn't mean becoming selfish. In fact, people with strong internal standards can often be more considerate because their kindness isn't driven by fear. They can help without needing gratitude. They can give without needing praise. They can apologize without needing reassurance that they're still a good person. They can accept criticism without collapsing. They can say no without hating themselves. Their behavior comes from choice instead of emotional dependence. That's a completely different kind of confidence. And people can feel the difference. Think about the difference between two people entering a room. One person constantly scans the room. Who noticed me? Did they like what I said? Was that joke funny? Did I sound intelligent? Does that person approve of me? They're physically present, but psychologically, they're monitoring everyone else's reactions. The second person walks in with a clear sense of who they are. They still notice people. They still listen. They still care about social cues. But they're not begging the room to confirm their identity. They don't need everyone to approve of them before they relax. That person tends to appear more confident, even if they aren't saying anything extraordinary. Why? Because their attention is directed outward toward the situation rather than inward toward themselves. Approval seeking makes you self-conscious. Self-respect makes you self-aware. Those sound similar, but they are completely different. Self-consciousness asks, how am I being perceived? Self-awareness asks, what am I actually doing? Self-consciousness makes you perform. Self-awareness makes you observe. And the more you develop self-awareness, the less you need constant validation because you can evaluate yourself honestly. You can ask, was I fair? Was I honest? Did I keep my word? Did I act according to my values? If the answer is yes, you don't need everyone else to confirm it. If the answer is no, you don't need to defend yourself. You correct the behavior. This is one of the most powerful changes you can make. Replace external validation with internal evaluation. Instead of asking, do they think I did the right thing? Ask, did I actually do the right thing? Instead of asking, do they still like me? Ask, did I behave in a way that respects both of us? Instead of asking, do they approve of my decision? Ask, was the decision consistent with my values and the information I had? Those questions return control to you. And once control returns to you, your behavior changes. You stop over-explaining. You stop chasing. You stop performing. You stop constantly checking reactions. You become more comfortable with silence. You become more comfortable with disagreement. You become more comfortable with being misunderstood. And strangely enough, this often improves your relationships. Because when you no longer need someone to approve of you, you can finally be honest with them. You can tell a friend the truth without being terrified that they will dislike you. You can tell your partner what you actually need instead of hoping they'll guess. You can disagree without turning the disagreement into a threat to the relationship. You can say, I love you, but I don't agree with you. You can say, I understand your point, but I'm going to do this differently. You can say, I'm sorry I hurt you, without adding 10 paragraphs designed to convince them that you're still a good person. That's maturity. And here's something important. Sometimes people will react badly when you stop seeking their approval. People who are comfortable with your compliance may interpret your boundaries as arrogance. People who benefited from your availability may call you distant. People who are used to you agreeing may accuse you of changing. And you need to be prepared for that. Because if your new boundaries only survive when everyone approves of them, they aren't real boundaries. Your growth may disappoint people who prefer the version of you that was easier to control. That's not necessarily a sign that you're doing something wrong. Sometimes it's simply evidence that the relationship dynamic is changing. Imagine you've spent years saying yes to everything. Suddenly you start saying no. The people around you may not immediately celebrate your growth. They may say, you've changed. And they're right. You have. But change isn't automatically betrayal. Sometimes changing is exactly what happens when you finally start respecting yourself. The key is to examine your behavior honestly. Are you becoming more responsible or simply more selfish? Are you becoming more confident or simply more arrogant? Are you setting boundaries or punishing people? Are you becoming independent or emotionally unavailable? Self-respect doesn't require becoming cruel. You don't need to stop caring about people. You need to stop using their approval as the foundation of your identity. That's the difference. You can still listen. You can still compromise. You can still apologize. You can still change your mind. You can still care deeply. But now you're doing those things because they align with your values, not because you're terrified of rejection. And that distinction is enormous. A man who changes his mind because someone provided better evidence is intelligent. A man who changes his mind because someone became angry is controllable. A man who apologizes because he recognizes that he caused harm is mature. A man who apologizes because someone threatened to leave him is dependent. A man who listens because he respects another person's perspective is strong. A man who listens because he needs their approval is performing. The behavior may look identical from the outside. The internal motivation is completely different, and that motivation determines whether you are free. This is why the goal isn't to stop caring what people think. That's an immature version of independence. You should care about the consequences of your actions. You should care about people you love. You should care about whether you're treating others fairly. But you should not hand them ownership of your self-worth. Their opinion is one piece of information. It is not the final verdict. Their approval can be appreciated without being required. Their criticism can be considered without being obeyed. Their disappointment can be acknowledged without being repaired immediately. Their rejection can hurt without becoming your identity. And once you reach that point, something changes in the way people interact with you. They realize that emotional pressure doesn't automatically move you. They realize that you can hear no without collapsing. They realize that you can say no without becoming aggressive. They realize that you don't need to win every conversation. They realize that your choices aren't constantly waiting for their approval. And that creates respect, not because you're intimidating, but because you have an internal center. You stand somewhere. You can be flexible without being shapeless. You can be kind without being submissive. You can be confident without needing to dominate. And you can be alone without feeling worthless. That last one may be the most important, because the fear of being alone makes people accept almost anything. They stay in unhealthy relationships. They tolerate disrespect. They chase people who are indifferent. They pretend to be happy. They silence their needs. They become smaller because the alternative feels terrifying. But when you become comfortable with your own company, your standards become stronger. You stop asking, "How do I keep this person?" and start asking, "Is this relationship actually good for me?" You stop asking, "How do I make them choose me?" and start asking, "Do I choose them?" You stop asking, "What can I do to make them happy with me?" and start asking, "Can we build something where both people can be honest?" That is the shift from approval seeking to self-respect. And if you want to build this mindset deeper, that's exactly what Dark Mind Protocol is designed to help with. The complete protocol and additional resources focus on emotional control, boundaries, psychological awareness, strategic communication, and developing the kind of internal stability that makes you harder to manipulate through approval, rejection, or emotional pressure. The link is available in the description and pinned comment. But start without anything external. The next time you catch yourself asking, "What will they think?" stop for a moment and replace it with, "What do I think?" The next time you're about to say yes because you're afraid someone will be disappointed, pause and ask, "Would I still say yes if I knew they would completely understand my no?" The next time you feel compelled to explain yourself, ask, "Am I providing necessary clarity? Or am I trying to make them approve of me?" And the next time someone becomes distant, don't immediately chase. Observe. Let their behavior give you information. Because once you stop trying to control everyone's perception of you, you become much more capable of seeing people clearly. You notice who respects your boundaries. You notice who only likes you when you're useful. You notice who can disagree with you without punishing you. You notice who supports you without requiring you to become someone else. And perhaps most importantly, you notice how often you have been doing the same thing to yourself. You have been rejecting your own needs before anyone else could reject them. You have been criticizing yourself before anyone else could criticize you. You have been changing yourself before anyone else could ask you to change. You have been trying to become universally acceptable when the real goal should have been becoming someone you can respect. Because at the end of your life, you won't be able to live inside everyone else's opinion of you. You'll have to live inside your own. And that relationship is the one you cannot escape. So build it carefully. Keep your word to yourself. Respect your own boundaries. Make decisions you can defend privately, even when nobody applauds them publicly. Admit your mistakes without destroying your identity. Improve without constantly announcing your improvement. Let people misunderstand you when necessary. Let people disagree. Let some people dislike you. Not because you want conflict, but because you understand that being respected by everyone is impossible. And trying to achieve it will eventually make you disrespect yourself. The strongest man isn't the one everyone approves of. He's the one who can hear approval without becoming addicted to it, hear criticism without becoming destroyed by it, hear rejection without begging against it, and hear disagreement without abandoning his own judgment. He can still love people. He can still care. He can still listen. But he doesn't hand them the keys to his identity. That's the freedom you should be building. Because when their approval becomes optional instead of necessary, your entire life becomes quieter. You stop performing. You stop chasing. You stop explaining every decision. You stop living for reactions. And you finally have enough mental space to build something that matters. Remember this. The more desperately you need people to approve of you, the more power you give them to define you. The less you need their approval, the more freely you can become yourself. Respect doesn't begin when everyone agrees with you. Respect begins when you can disagree with someone and still remain grounded. When you can say no and remain kind. When you can walk away and remain peaceful. When you can be criticized and remain thoughtful. When you can be rejected and remain whole. That is when approval stops being a requirement and becomes what it should have been all along. Simply an opinion. A nice thing to receive, but never something you need in order to know your own worth.